On this video, I'm going to continue the life of Christ. And we're working now at looking at Jesus walking on the water, and the 12 in the storm, and Jesus in the darkness was seen walking toward them on the water. And so I'm in it, I'm reading, I'm doing a harmony, so I'm reading in Mark 6:47 to 52. I'm going to read the Greek text and then give an English translation and then a brief exposition as we're going through it. Kai apsias genamenes ein ta ploian in mesotes thalases, kai autas manas epites gaze. And when it was evening, the boat was in the middle of the sea, and he was alone on the land. That is speaking of Jesus. But the boat is in the middle of the sea. And notice what happens. Kai idon autus basanitsamenus into elaunen ein garcha anamas in antias autois. Peri tetartain fulagain tes nuktas erkatai prasautus per paton epi tes thalases kai ethelen para parothain autus. So it reads in verse 48, and seeing them tormented, distressed in rowing, for the wind was contrary to them. And about the fourth watch of the night, he comes to them, walking on the sea. And he would have passed by them, but they, when they saw him walking on the sea, supposed that it was, or that he was, that it was an apparition. So he saw them walking on the sea, and he was desirous to pass by them. But then they saw him, and they thought they had seen a ghost. It is interesting when the waves are tormented, and they're trying to row and trying to get to the other side. And so, as they are trying to row and do everything they can do, they realize their efforts are not going very far. It was night, and the wind was very bad, and it was dark. And all of a sudden, Jesus passed by them when they were walking, or when he was walking on the sea. And so we move on to talk about how they saw him. Hoide idantes autan epites thalases parapatunta edaxan hate phantasma estin kai anekraxan. That is, and they saw him upon the sea walking, and they thought that he was a ghost, really, an apparition, I should say. And as a result, they were deeply troubled, and they cried out in fear. So here we have, it's nighttime. The wind is contrary to any kind of smoothness getting across the Sea of Galilee. And all of a sudden, they see Jesus walking. They don't recognize it as Jesus. They think it's some type of a ghost. walking on the sea. And they cried out. There's anxiety because it's dark and they're not able to move forward because of the storm. And so in verse 50, we read on, Pantes gar uden edan kai etarakthesan ha de euthus elalesin met auton kai lege autois tarsete ego me me fabeste. And that is, they cried out, for they saw him, and they were afraid. They were deeply troubled. But he immediately spake with them, and said unto them, Be of good cheer. Don't be afraid. It is I. Do not be afraid. Ego me. It is I. So literally, stop being afraid. And notice what happens in verse 51. Kayanebe pras autus eis ta ployan, kai akapasin ha animas, kai leon ek perasu in autois existanta. So he got into the boat with them, and notice the wind ceased. The wind stopped, and they were amazed. They were utterly astounded or amazed, for they did not understand what was happening. Ugar sunekan epi tois artois al ein auton he cardia peporomene. And they were astounded, afraid, for they did not understand about the loaves. They had already seen the miracle that Christ had done in feeding the 5,000, and yet they're afraid because it didn't really register that Jesus was divine, and now he's walking on water because he created the waters and he has authority over them. When you read a text like this, it brings encouragement because it was dark and they were rowing and they weren't able to make it because the winds were strong and contrary. And in the midst of that troubling scene, Jesus is walking on the water, showing his divinity again over the waters, and comes up to them and says, Why are you afraid? He gets into the boat and there's a great stillness. The winds cease. In life, a lot of times, and even in the world we live in today, it can be very dark and everything seems to be dark and windy, but it's something to know that Jesus is still in the midst of the raging seas and the raging winds, and he is saying, Peace be still. And he is the king over the waters, over the seas, and he also can give us reassurance in fearful times.